I'd like to share with you a true story related to a tragic accident that happened at the Packet Pier here in Wicklow town on Sunday the 3rd of August 1969, when a car carrying 4 passengers plunged off the pier into the cold dark water, resulting in the tragic death of 3 of these passengers. So from Halpin's Bridge Cafe here in Wicklow town, we bring you a poem called 6 Knots Towards Wicklow. Pull up the anchor and let us sail away. Not wait for tomorrow, for today is the day. We'll sail around the ocean, flag high on our ship, 6 knots towards Wicklow, Vincent Byrne and Mick Bibb. Dolphins are swimming as we head around the coast, tall wind in our sails and we're making the most. Seagulls high flying and amazing to see, this townland called Wicklow for you and for me. Let's dock in the harbour as the sun sets on high, and stand for a moment as time passes by. To recall to your memory some stories of Mick, I spoke to the Major where he stood at the slip. He told me a story about Vincent and Mick. At the end of the packet, could you picture this? A night in black darkness and a mist in the sky, 3 bodies recovered and families ask why.
I was in the Abbey Cinema that particular night. The tragedy occurred, yes. I was with a mate of mine, Jimmy Doyle, and I remember the late Mick O'Reilly being there that particular night, and later on during the film being rushed out in a hurry. At the time I wasn't aware of what was happening, but I assume some of the Gardaí made it known to him of the tragedy that had occurred down in the harbour. And after the film ended, I saw a lot of people congregate outside the cinema door, and I overheard them talking about an accident that had occurred down in the harbour. Now, it was a terrible, terrible night, a dreary, misty night, and unfortunately these people took a wrong turn at the wire ropes and drove on down towards the Packet Pier. I assumed that they saw the lights of Castle Street, the lights of the houses in Castle Street, and were probably just going to drive on, and unfortunately they ended up in the river. Now, had there been a ship there that night, that tragedy would never have occurred, but unfortunately there wasn't.
A car had gone under, sank down 13 feet. It's cold and it's dark, with their hands how they creep. A torch in a bag was the light, it's all they had. For Vincent and Mick, these families were glad.
Yeah, I remember I think I was 9 years old, and I was staying up in Kavanagh's house. I was friends with Charlie Kavanagh's children and all. And I remember the night when he came home, and there was a massive amount of shock all around the house because he was telling what he'd seen, and he'd been standing on the bank wall making the sketch. And then that night he sat down and started to sketch it. And I remember how upset he was, and himself and Betty Kavanagh were talking about it. And the next day, of course, it was a massive story. I was only 9 years old, but even then I realised how tragic it was. And then the strange thing is, when Pat started speaking to me about this story and about doing this poem and all, and he mentioned that one woman had survived. And that was the first time 2 weeks ago that I actually knew that somebody had survived. All those years I thought all 4 people had tragically died.
One other tragedy was at the Dane Steps. A young man in trouble were Turlough Hughes and Michael O'Reilly. They done their best. The young man went under and came up too late and found himself standing at God's golden gate. So rest on, Mick Bibb, as I write on, a poem to you of memories not gone. Let's sail back together now as the sun sets, to your home in the heavens, now loved ones, God rest. Just before we go, I would like to introduce you to Bernadette, who on that night was the only surviving member of that party of 4. And I would just like to say that after 45 years since that tragic accident, it has been an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. And the same goes here. I'd like to thank the people of Wicklow for all they did for us. I know it's a long time ago, but I never forget it. There's not a day goes that we don't think of that. It's a hard thing not to think of. And I say thank you to all the people.